Welcome back. Very good morning. If you've just joined us, this is Newsroom on SABC News. Now, in 2016, we still find certain corporate cultures and structures pose barriers to the advancement of women in the form of outdated policies regarding part-time work, flexi work and job sharing, women facing difficult challenges in the workplace. But despite these significant milestones we've achieved, a few key obstacles remain. What are they? To tell us, well, we're joined for this discussion by Dr. Amaleya Goneos-Malka, who is a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Pretoria here in South Africa. Very good morning, Doctor. Thank you for joining us.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
You just heard the kind of introduction. Just give us your introductory remarks with regards to what are the challenges that women are generally still facing now in corporate culture.
Well, maybe to go back a little bit before we go into the corporate culture conversation. So from a population point of view, if we look at women between the ages of 15 to 64, there's 18.7 million women. So that's classified as our labour force, people who qualify for the labour force. But in terms of the numbers that are actually in employment, it's only 6.7 million. So that's approximately 34% of the group that we're talking about. And their distribution in the workplace, because that's also one of the parities that we have to look at. The lowest areas would be within the construction, mining and transport sector, which are approximately 10, 13 and 18% respectively. And you're absolutely right, when we look at it from a corporate point of view in terms of those figures, in 2012 Businesswoman South Africa did a study and they found that on average you had 21.4% of women represented in executive management. Of JSE listed companies in South Africa, only 3.6% were female CEOs. So that's the South African context.
What does that say about South Africa, and where do we rank compared to the rest of the world?
Well, we actually rank pretty well. So in terms of Grant Thornton's work, so they do release an annual survey. According to their figures, slightly different statistics, they put us at approximately 22%. But so 27%, and the benchmark globally is 27%. So in terms of the rest of the world, South Africa's doing really well. And part of that is contributed to our legislation. But I do see you smiling, and I concur with your smile.
I find it ridiculous that we are living in the 21st century and still we are having the same arguments that we had 30 years ago. Does that perturb you in any way?
Absolutely. Part of the elements which come through would include things like motherhood, so taking time off of work and putting that obviously sets you back in terms of progressing in your career. But then by the same token, if you think from a 30-year ago point of view, when men, regardless of countries, were in conscription, it was compulsory service. So in effect, they were also taken out of the workplace and had to re-enter. So it almost nullifies the argument. Other factors, from an attitudinal perspective, so women don't negotiate enough when they're going into the workforce or looking towards their promotions. They tend to, a man in general terms will think of himself as putting himself first, and I have done this, I have achieved this. But when a woman goes through, she'll often say, it's because of my team that I've got to where I am. So it is components of being more assertive. Another key factor when you're going into the work environment, and you put through and you have your pay slip, whenever you go for new employment, you have to submit that pay slip. So you are going to have a lower increment as you're going through to different positions.
Absolutely. So, it's kind of the system is kind of built that way, it seems. But what about senior management positions? My wife is an executive herself, and she's having great difficulty at a sort of senior level to get respect more than anything else. Why are we still battling with that?
Part of that's to do with culture components. So from a South African perspective, we do come from a traditionally patriarchal society. And when you look at the demographics as you go higher up the corporate ladder, there is still, it's still a male-dominated environment. So it's approximately, if we look at these figures, 79% would be within the male, would be men. And as you're going into that environment, you've got to contend with cultural clashes on that level.
I often hear amongst some of my friends, male mostly, around the bright fire, that women aren't ruthless enough to run businesses and to be chief executives and the like. What's your response to that?
It's an interesting observation because there's a thing called cultural bias.
Yeah.
And when we look at these, a woman will be putting through, conveying the same elements, and her actions would be perceived as being aggressive, whereas a man could be doing that same behavior and he would be perceived as being assertive. And there's numerous studies which have been done where they will send out a CV or there'll be a piece of research and they'll change the name. So it'll be a man and it'll be a woman. Same document, same paper. The perceived man would be outrated than the woman. Other factors that come through are when we look at, from a behavioural point of view, if we think that we want women to become more assertive, we want them to become more confident, and those and build their personal brand, build their networking, and those are all key components. But there was an interesting study where what they said was there's actually other elements that we need to look at. We need to look at what are you contributing to the business?
Yeah.
So what is your business acumen? What is the strategic intent and how you're doing your position? And bottom line, financial performance. So whilst those other factors I mentioned were important, I do think that we also need to equip and train women in other areas which are about looking at the bottom line of the business. And education is another key area.
Now, I want to talk about the numbers quickly because senior management numbers in South Africa, proportionate women, what does it look like?
Well, according to Businesswomen South Africa, we're on 21.8% across
That's
the board.
1 in 5.
Yep. In the executive level, it's about 5.5% on chairpersons, 17% on what do we class that as normal sort of leadership, managerial roles. When we look at information coming through from the statistics to say in terms of the labour force, they said on highly skilled level positions, it's only 11.7% are women. So you look at that as a comparative to men. So we need to provide women with more support, whether it's on the educational side, whether that's through from a legislative point of view, and as well as policy within organisations. And pay parity is another huge issue.
You're touching on the pay parity scenario, the gender pay gap as it's officially known in South Africa. How do you overcome the obstacle that you pointed out a little bit earlier that, they take your no matter what the job it is you're going to do, they'll give you an extra 7% on top of what you earned before? It is an obstacle, isn't it? How are we going to overcome that?
Tremendous obstacle. I think it has to come through from the human resources in terms of regulations that are going through. It's to do with upskilling yourself. It's also to do with stronger negotiation skills. Still on topic, but slightly off, Charlize Theron in the latest Huntsman's movie, she heard that her salary was under one of the lead actors, and because of providing that evidence, she got an additional $10 million.
Well, that's lovely for her. I'm very happy for Charlize. She's done very well there. I'm more worried about hard-working women in the business world out there grinding it out. Shouldn't we be thinking about a scenario that you get the pay packet by the position? If I get promoted to being CEO, then I should get the same pay that the previous CEO has earned. Isn't that more fair?
I would absolutely agree with you. And two things that I'd like to raise here. In 2015, Mark Benioff, who's the CEO of Salesforce, he took a look at what the situation was from a gender gap in terms of the pay area. And after looking at it, he decided to level the playing field, and that cost him an additional $3 million to put that on an equal playing field. So it is about leadership actually coming through to the party and saying, this isn't right. We live in an environment where we are looking for work of equal value should have equal pay. And by the same token, when we're looking at this scenario, on the equal pay scenario, that was in 1951. In 1951, the International Labour Organization had a convention where they put through that we had work of equal pay for equal value. And in 2013, the Employment Equity Act was revised to again institute that for legislation.
Well, you touched briefly on the different sectors, but I wanted to go back to the different sectors and the sectors where women are doing, where the numbers are doing less well for women and where they're doing better and why.
Well, the traditional sectors where we're doing less well would probably be, I'd say, more labour intensive. So in the manufacturing space, in the construction and transportation. And one of the things that we look at from a global changes, we are really evolving from a manufacturing economy through to a services economy. So on the services side, women are generally doing better. Because of the legacy of South Africa and where we find ourselves, we do have a high concentration of women in the low-skilled sectors, serving in private households and doing a nominal trade.
Well, in conclusion, what about our institutions of learning, for instance, women studying engineering, for instance, at the University of Pretoria? Are we seeing those numbers? Are they starting to stack up, or is that where we may be behind also a little bit?
It's interesting that you mention that. On an academic level, women are absolutely upskilling themselves. 2013, the figures in terms of graduates, the ratio of graduates at tertiary institutions, 61% women. So there is already that bias towards women on upskilling. But it's not just about what happens at the academic level. I think we have to look at the entire value chain so that we don't lose them along the way and put in measures which help them and enable them to succeed and rise up on that corporate ladder.
Very interesting discussion this morning with you, Dr. Malka. Thank you for joining us here on Newsroom. The numbers don't lie. The numbers do not lie. We need to seriously, we need to be a world leader and empowering women in South Africa. That's what we're about. It's Women's Month, by the way. We've still got a couple of weeks left of Women's Month. We need to instill this in all spheres of society. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, Kendall Mahamati will be taking us back to the Olympics, where today is a big day. Caster Semenya will start her campaign, and of course we know of all this abuse that she's been having in the international media because she's not a woman. Are you kidding me? After a short break.